Okay, section 1-2 starts on page 94, so please turn your book to page 94 and follow along. We're going to talk about overtime pay, and our objectives are to figure out what our straight time pay is, which was what we learned in section 1-2, or 1-1 rather, and now we're just going to add to that overtime and get that concept down, and we'll figure out what our total pay is here. So, overtime pay is a real simple concept, and it's an excellent thing. What it means is you get paid more than your normal hourly rate. And that additional time, the additional pay that you get is your overtime pay. Now, the book talks always about overtime in terms of anything over 40 hours a week, and I want to make sure you know that's really up to the employer by and large. Because many employers, in fact by law, employers have to pay overtime for any hours over 40 hours a week that you worked in any one week, some rate of overtime pay. But some employers might do it differently. They might say that any hours that you work over 8 hours in a day is overtime pay, and then they'll tell you which rate that you'll get for overtime pay. So it really is employer dependent, but the calculations are always just the same, and it's pretty straightforward. Typically you see something like, and you hear terms like time and a half or double time. What these two terms just mean is, in double time is probably the easiest one. If you earn $5 an hour, if you have double time overtime pay, any hour that you work for overtime, for double time you'd work $10 an hour. 5 times 2, double time is 10, right? Not too hard. Time and a half just means your hourly rate times 1.5. So it's going to be pretty straightforward math. We just got to make sure that we get the math, the additions right, and we'll be pretty okay. So our calculation is just going to be our overtime rate, either time and a half or double time, whatever it is, times how many hours we worked overtime, and we're going to take that overtime pay and add it to our straight time pay, just like we learned in section 1-1, and we'll get our total pay. Let's look at the example, work through here. So here's a guy that worked, and he's paid $8.20 an hour for a regular 40-hour week. His overtime rate is 1.5 times, or the term you're always going to see is time and a half, for anything over 40 hours a week. This week he worked his 40 hours, plus he worked $10, 10 hours of overtime. So he worked 50 hours this week. We have to just figure out what his total pay is. Well, step one is just straight from section 1-1. We just take his $8.20 an hour, multiply it by 40 hours worked in a week, and we got a straight time pay. We already did a bunch of problems just like that, and you got that down easy. In step two, we're going to find his overtime rate, which is 1.5. We covered fractions and stuff last chapter. So we take 1.5 or 1.5 times his $8.20, and that's going to give us his overtime rate. And then we're going to multiply that times his overtime hours worked. And he worked, in this case, 10 hours. So 1.5 times 8.2 times 10 is his overtime pay. He earned an extra $123 that week. That's pretty cool. So his total gross pay, in this case, his gross pay is going to be his straight time pay plus his overtime pay, $451. So just remember, gross pay is the same even if you have some overtime pay, because as a review, gross pay, gross income, is the amount of money that you earn before anything is taken out. Let's see if we can take a look at some of these examples. And I'm going to jump straight to this chart because you're going to be doing some questions off this chart, and I want to make sure you understand how this thing works. Let's look at number 4. We have his regular pay, and number 4, a person's regular pay is $10.60. His overtime rate in this case is time and a half, 1.5. And in number 4, he worked 5 hours of overtime. So we have to figure out first his straight time pay. Then we have to figure out his overtime pay, and then we got to figure out his total pay. So here's how you're going to do this. And I think you probably already know, but let's just make sure we have this down. Straighten out this paper for you. your calculations are going to be $10.60 times 40 hours a week, and that's going to equal his straight time pay. His overtime pay is going to be $10.60 times 1.5 times the 5 hours that the book tells us that he worked overtime. Sorry about that, I ran off the screen a little bit. And that's going to be his overtime pay. And his total pay is just going to be the sum of these two. Let's grab our calculator and figure it out. So I have $10.60 times 40. That's going to be 424 for straight time pay. $10.60 times 1.5 times 5 hours. That's going to be $79.50. $79.50, and I'm just going to hit the plus button. 424. That's going to be $503.50. And you'll notice, and I know this is I keep reiterating this, but I have students ask me all the time, yes, that's $503.50. The calculator doesn't put zeros on that are unnecessary to the right of the decimal place. Zeros are unnecessary. So this is going to be the answer to 4A, 4B, and 4C. There you have it. Now we have time and a half. If this was double time, we would have just put times 2 here. Same calculations. I think you're going to find these problems pretty straightforward. And I hope when you get a job, you get an opportunity to work all the overtime, and you take the opportunity to work all the overtime you can. Go ahead and get busy on your homework. That should become available when you've reviewed this, and good luck.